Welcome to another January wish list update episode. Today I will be joined by Brandon Owens, and he's going to be reviewing Gravediggers with us. My name is Ryan. I used to be good at War Machine. Welcome to Spell Rack. All right, in continuing with our January wish list update series, today I'm joined by Brandon Owens to go over Gravediggers. Brandon, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hello, Ryan. I'm Brandon Owens. I play Gravediggers amongst many other factions. I've been playing Gravediggers since they came out earlier this year and have put a lot of sweat and love and tears into learning the faction.
Now, obviously, you're an incredible player to start with, so whatever you're going to play is going to show well. Looking at Gravediggers, thought that the faction was really lacking. And then I watched your performances throughout the year, and that's where I really caught on to the fact that this is just a high skill cap faction that you need to really figure out. And once it gets figured out, it can be very, very powerful. So I think you did incredible things with them this year.
Yeah, it's very common sentiment. I think for the reasons that you identified, it takes a lot of initial investment to get to that point where you can actually start to get results from them. And that scares a lot of people off, understandably.
So before we jump into specific units and stuff, we got a big update coming in January, lower lethality, no spell racks. How do you think that affects Gravediggers on kind of a global level?
So I think that the removal of spell racks is likely to affect Gravediggers more profoundly than a lot of other factions. And that's for two major reasons. One, I think Gravediggers started with a very powerful rack. It was sort of one of their greatest strengths as a faction was the versatility that the rack provides. And I think that a big part of that is that it plays into the overall theme of the faction, which is to be a versatility Swiss Army knife type of faction.
Oh.
And the rack was just one very strong expression of that aspect. And so I think when you remove the rack from Gravediggers, you're taking away a lot of their versatility, which is core to their strength. Also, I think some of the rack spells in particular were faction defining in that they were also individually responsible for a lot of the power level of the faction, such as Rockwall, such a versatile but strong spell. And when you take a spell like that away from all but maybe one of the casters, they're taking a really big hit to their power level. So I think they're going to feel the rack removal more than a lot of factions.
Yeah, I think Rockwall's a really good example that you bring up because I think Rockwall is a highly skill-based spell. Rockwall on its face says, I give something cover, but Rockwall used at a higher level can block charge lanes or landing zones.
And you can do things like prevent a model from contesting a scenario piece on a turn because you remove real estate. It's like you said, it's so flexible and versatile on how you use it. The faction's gonna really miss having that available.
All right, well, let's get in here and let's talk about Hasker first. He doesn't see much play, so what does he need?
I think Hasker needs a lot. The biggest thing to me is his feat is awful. Personally, my perspective, I cannot stand a feat that has a clause that says flip a coin and on tails your feat does nothing. And then on heads, a good portion of the meta still doesn't care about it, either because of their armor values or they're immune to knockdown. It's just a terrible feat, in my opinion. So give him a feat that actually does something that's consistent and reliable. I really like a version of his feat where it's just a flat armor reduction and maybe has like entropic force within the aura of the mind. And I think that would be particularly appropriate because that's something that the faction lacks. Both of those things are something the faction lacks. And it would be a good way for him to be an expression of those rules once per game. And I think it would remove the damage element from it. So you're not worried about balancing how high is the damage. Do we need to roll more dice on top of that? Just make it do a specific thing that is useful. Beyond changing the feat, I think that Hasker's overall theme of his kit really wants him to be contributing in melee, and he's just missing the half of the kit that actually would allow him to do so. He's got Killing Spree, which is such a cool rule for a Warcaster, but he has no sprint. He doesn't even have repo. So if you go and do a Killing Spree, he's just out there. Now, there are other casters in the game that have similar rules, like Butcher and Orgoth, or even Wolf in Storm Legion, that encourage them to mix it up in melee and kill as many guys as they can. But they have rules that actually allow them to potentially survive afterwards, such as Blood Quenched. So if you gave him Blood Quench or something like that, that'd be cool. But I think a more appropriate thematic rule is just to give the man sprint. If he has sprint, he can go Killing Spree, move 6 more inches, which will, in some games, give you the opportunity to get him to safety. It just really completes that kit that he's trying to go for. Be somebody who can contribute in melee by killing multiple models. I think also he is supposed to be this commando warcaster, but he doesn't do anything to really help or make commandos shine.
Sure.
So I think if you gave him a veteran leader such as commando models gain weapon master, that'd be really powerful and
Yeah.
thematic. Or if you gave him battle plans or something, and one of the battle plans was give a commando unit weapon master or something like that, that'd be cool. And in terms of the spell shake up for him, I think giving him Fury Strength would be very appropriate. Make him the like melee infantry caster who wants to run commandos specifically, maybe also rangers, whatever. But I think that would both solidify his identity and also take him to a point where he's worth playing in some pairs.
Yeah, the having killing spree with a Mat 7 POW 12 also not very exciting, right?
No, not at all.
You mentioned these melee buffs for commandos, and your infantry largely is range focused, right? So to actually give you a way to apply some emphasis to a melee game adds another vector to the faction. So I think that's an incredibly well thought out buff, and makes sense, especially if you did have battle plans to give out to some of the units. I like that. That would be cool. And then Sprint, yes, Sprint feels very thematic for what he's doing.
Make him Plugger the Warcaster.
There you go. How about Boom?
I think Boom Boom is in a reasonable place right now. I think the main issue is that people think Rangers should get nerfed in January.
Yeah.
There's a real possibility that they do, and that the nerf applies to their ranged output, essentially putting lone gunmen onto the Ranger gunners so that they can't CRA with volume fire, which I get in a vacuum if we're just talking about those models. The fundamental issue with a nerf like that is that Gravedigger's strength is so inextricably tied to the ranged output of Rangers that if you remove that, the faction takes a massive power hit. So you need to do some other things in other places to balance that out. I think the main thing you can do is give Gravediggers viable infantry melee options so that they can play a melee game as well, not rely on Warjack melee and then having this really S tier level infantry shooting threat. Right. And the way you can do that with a caster like Hasker we talked about, with McCoy, give him POW 16 on his melee weapon so that he can actually punch things.
Yep.
And give him an armor shield so that he's more survivable, so that he can actually play this midfield role of a bastion tank of a warcaster that wants to sit in the midfield and contribute some to draw fire from the enemy, or to be able to get some incremental value done in attrition without being at risk of instantly dying if he's in an aggressive position. I think if you do something like that, even with a nerf to Rangers, then he might be a valuable caster to look at for some pairs.
Well, we've seen a little bit of precedence for that now, right? With the newest faction to be on the printing block, they put shields on their character that's on the battle engines, right?
Ira McCay, the battle engine warcaster, and then the rails interceptors, they all gained a +2 arm shield.
Yeah.
And it's transformative for those models, especially for McCay, because that +2 armor allows her to play much more aggressively. She's not invincible. Like, she's still a battle engine caster, so she's base step 10. She's very susceptible to armor debuffs where those exist, and she can be killed if you're too aggressive.
Yeah.
You can play her far more aggressively, use her ranged output, spend her focus, and not be afraid that you're going to die in a lot of scenarios. And I think that kind of change is very positive for the faction to have a caster like that. And McCoy is obviously the one to apply that to in Gravediggers.
Yeah. And I didn't say the words Crucible Guard, but for those listening, I was referring to Crucible Guard. Brandon played Crucible Guard in an event a few weeks back, and so they got the +2 shield, so that makes sense. Any changes for feat or spells here?
Inhospitable Ground becomes better with the change that we just discussed, where you give him a shield because he can use it more aggressively and be less afraid of camping fewer focus to cast it. His feat makes more sense as well if we give Gravediggers that melee infantry option. The cav, the threat range really start to matter if it's worth charging your infantry instead of just shooting them every turn. So I think if the faction gets the changes it really should get in that direction, the feat is fine as is.
Very cool. On to Rosko.
Rosko's biggest issue to me from the beginning is the fact that she's a caster who needs to get value out of her gun every turn, or why are you playing her? The problem is, if you shoot her gun, she doesn't have particularly durable defensive stats, and you want to spend focus with her, even with Blood Boon. Like, you still want to spend focus boosting and using your spells. You really want to be able to retreat. after you shoot the gun. She has a rule called run and gun, where if you destroy a model with your gun, then you get to make a full advance. The problem is that if you don't destroy a model and you were counting on that for survival, you're stuck there. And there's so many instances in the game where that variance is going to get you killed, either because you can't use it because your opponent has shield guards that aren't going to be killed, or they have some ability that if you kill a model, it might have tough. You might have some kind of invocations to keep it from dying or something else. So I think she should just have refuge. Just give her
Yes.
refuge so that she herself can shoot her gun. As long as she hits something, there's still some variance. If you don't hit, then you don't get to refuge. But as long as she hits something, she can then go back to safety. So she would be able to contribute turn over turn, which is what she needs to be able to do to function. And I think also swap Curse of Shadows for Crippling Grasp, because she doesn't do anything to support her army right now besides the feat realistically. And Curse of Shadows is just not enough. I think Crippling Grasp is on brand for her because of her brief stint in Crick's custody.
I see.
It just feels thematic for her, I think, if somebody's going to get Crippling Grasp in Signar. And that gives her a control element, which you don't have in faction. I think it would be a really good way to bring up her power level. Just those two changes, and I think we'll be good.
Jakes, she's really squishy. Go ahead.
So first change, just make her arm 16. It's a small bump that I think helps a lot.
Yeah.
And then I think Jakes wants to be this ultimate duelist. I get in there, I kill stuff, I get out caster. But she's 1-inch melee, speed 6, and POW 12 base, which I hate. I hate it. Like there's no two ways about it. She's got very cool rules except for her defensive stats and her offensive stats. I think you can fix that if you give her either 2-inch melee, which they probably don't want to do because her physical weapons are not 2-inch melee. I think she's the perfect caster to give the lunge rule to. Lunge is a rule on Ashland's card. During her activation, she gains 2-inch melee. And this is because she's a duelist and she knows how to extend the reach of her attacks, even if her weapons are short, right? So it makes sense thematically for her. It makes a huge difference on her ability to contribute. And I think also just straight up make her POW 14 melee. She'll go to 17 from synergy if you build that up first. She's not going to break the world. Right now, Horus is just POW 17 all the time. Aslanov is just POW 16 or 18 all the time. Like they've given it to casters where you have this powerful melee output. Nobody in Signar has a real melee attack on top of not having melee infantry. Make her the one where if she has synergy, she's POW 17, is not anywhere near over the top. And I think if you do those things, that'll go a long way to making her viable and desirable in the new sandbox we're going to see in January.
Yeah, that makes sense. I definitely agree with the armor. I almost feel like she could be speed 7, and that's another way to you get up there a little bit more and you get back a little bit. Kane, does Kane need any touch-ups?
I would remove Bless from his feet, first of all. That's always been my complaint about Kane. And I've played a lot of Kane, but I don't think he should have a feat that gives +2 POW and blessed. It just negates so much of the defensive tech available to deal with these alpha tier shooting lists that you can bring. It just shouldn't be there. I think instead of blessed, his feat should give repo 3 to all of the otherwise eligible models for the feat, so gun mages and warjacks. So you get this powerful shooting and a little bit of repositioning available to you. I think it's still a very powerful feat. I think it's more balanced, and so you don't need to worry about Kane just absolutely dominating some matchups because his feat gives you blessed.
Yeah, I've seen games where a friend of mine played in a local tournament and he shot 2 colossals off the table on feat turn. And it was just like
not even batting an eye at that.
GG, sorry.
That's Kane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Vargas is your well, not just your mainstay, but I would say the mainstay of the faction. How about Vargas?
So I think we're gonna have to do a lot to the faction overall to make up for the fact that Vargas is losing rack 3 and losing access to all of those powerful rack spells, because that was a big part of his strength. Fundamentally for his design, I think if you remove evasive from his card, you'll remove a lot of the complaint and surprise that players have when they learn that he has evasive. I think you could remove evasive from his card, give him 2 extra armor and give him steady. Because he looks like a caster who should be 15-18 with steady. He's this big tanky guy with a huge gun. I think it makes sense. And it also lets you play him in the role that I think he is designed to play, which is a sort of mid backline, but like closer to midfield caster who wants to shoot his gun every turn.
Yep.
You want to be able to spend his focus for his gun. You got to be not, center line, but not hiding in your deployment zone so that you get the range. And if you make him 15-18 with steady, you can do that in more games more of the time and not have to just rely on your feet turn to be able to take that position. When you lose that rack again, I don't know what they're going to do to make up for it for him, but he's going to need something to have a role.
Yeah.
And the feet is not
Yeah.
enough.
So it sounds like, I mean, for the most part, I mean, Vargas has been your caster that is head and shoulders above the rest. So if we leave Vargas sort of neutral, move his kit around a tiny bit, and obviously he's going to get worse because of that rack 3, but bring everybody else up so that the faction has more options, right? I mean, you're not quite in the Sea Raiders camp, but I feel like you guys are close, you know, with everything being pushed towards Vargas. I would just love to see all the other casters. Everybody else needs to come up. All right. So how about Warjacks? What are you liking or disliking for Warjacks?
I think Valiants are pretty much where they need to be.
Mm-hmm.
Big caveat here with Silence of Death going away. I don't know what they're going to do for the faction for damage output. The cap
Gotcha.
right now is POW 18 with the Valiant. I don't know what's going to be available to make sure the faction can actually kill things when it
Yeah.
has to, especially if Rangers are losing the ability to shoot really well.
Yeah.
Then you're going to have to melee things. And if your cap is POW 18, well, the faction just doesn't get played. But I think the Valiant's balance between durability and point cost is good, so we don't need to change much. A
Okay.
quality of life thing that I would love to see is making the grenade fist on the left arm go down to 5 points. I don't understand why this thing is 7 points. You can't take it at 7 points. You will never take it at 7 points. It's unrealistic. If you wanted to, you could take the fist off of it, but I think you could print it as is at 5 points, and it makes sense, and it makes it a real option for the model.
Yeah. Okay. I like that. Okay. Valiant aside, how about the others?
Patriot, I think, is also in a really good spot. It's
Mhm.
very cheap for very good value for some loadouts. There are other loadouts, however, that are also completely unrealistic, like the Blaster Shield. Blaster Shield being so expensive at 5 points
Yeah.
means you will literally never see it on a Patriot. I've never seen it on a Patriot all year. I don't know why you would take it on a Patriot. But if you made it 4 points, maybe. The biggest thing to me is the Tracer Cannon, though. That gun is awful. And there's a very simple fix for it. Instead of Tracer rounds being a star attack,
Yeah.
make it have 2 shot types, normal ammunition and Tracer rounds, and make Tracer rounds deal no damage.
Mm.
So you have the option to shoot your gun to flare a model while ignoring stealth, or to shoot your gun for damage and you still get D3 shot. I
Yeah.
think if you do that, and probably still reduce its points because it's only a PAL 11 gun, I think if you
Yeah.
do that, maybe drop it down to 4 points, then we're in business.
Yeah. Even 4 points with that change still feels appropriate. Because yeah, you're right. It's a POW 11, and it's, you know, it's just a D3, right? Do you think does Deuce need to come down? Does Plugger need to come down? Or you think they're fine?
I think Deuce is pretty much perfect where he is.
Okay.
I think Plugger is probably perfect where he is, with the caveat that I would consider making him POW 17 base, again, because we're losing Silence of Death. So when you
Yeah.
take Plugger in a list, if you need him to kill a heavy, without Silence of Death, POW 16 is really pillow fisted, even with crit decap.
Yeah.
POW 17 helps you get there. But otherwise, I love Plugger as he is. I definitely would not nerf him in any way, because with the removal of the rack, his limitations and the limitations of the faction in general are only going to be accentuated. So I
Yeah.
think he's in a really good spot.
One of the things that they talked about in the January update was also reducing ranged attacks, right? Like the long end of the range attacks come down a little bit. And plus, obviously, everybody's going to lose Matt and Rat. Like, I get it. Like, does Plugger go to Matt 7? I don't know, probably. But like, if his gun went down to range 8 because they said they were bringing down range on guns, then that just hurts him substantially. And then you really kind of need the POW 17 to keep him viable, right? That's just, you're a ranged faction and you're going to get touched more. And yeah, if you lose a lot of your ranged, you need some melee to offset that. And so, yeah, I think POW 17 here makes sense.
The last Warjack, I think probably we're talking about Beaker. I think he needs a big overhaul.
Uh-huh.
And I put a lot of time into trying to make Beaker work this year, because I think he's so cool thematically. He's got a lot of flavor,
Yeah.
but he for 16 points, he doesn't give you enough value on a game-to-game basis. And
Yeah.
part of that is because he has so much of his point costs sunk into rules that are irrelevant the vast majority of the time, that he just can't do his job as a 16-point heavy warjack outside of that. There are three major things I would change to Beaker. One, I would up his melee POW, probably just to 19. Like, make him able to kill another heavy. I would probably give him aggressive. Like, I want my 16-point heavy to be able to kill another heavy, and he does not do it right now, which is wild. And with Silence of Death gone, there's no possibility for that. So POW 19, maybe give him aggressive. I definitely want him to do something that says, I am the high-tech warjack in this faction that's going to support my army in a meaningful way. And I think the way to do that is to give him an ability where if he spends one focus, he gains entropic force for 1 round.
Yeah, him having entropic force makes sense. That's something that you noted earlier on in our conversation as a need in the faction, right? So to give you another way of getting that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think if you do that for Beaker, he becomes this tool that you will want to take in some lists that you don't take in every list, because he's still a premium warjack that has decent weapons if you increase the power of his melee, but is not your mainline fighter,
Yeah.
and he's not going to be your ultimate shooting warjack like Deuce. He's in this very awkward in-between place, but you give him that tech, and all of a sudden he's worth taking when that tech is something that you want. I think that's exactly where a jack like Beaker should be.
All right. Can we answer your really two big hairballs heavy field gun? Do you just delete it?
The heavy field gun has some real thematic strength to it, and it should be a piece that you want to take in a Gravediggers pair.
Yeah.
And right now it's not that. It is
No.
way too squishy, and it is a single attack with no reliability.
Yep.
And the impact of that attack is also not high enough. I think there are a few things you can change to this model to make it really compelling without breaking it. One is give the model Carapace. As a model
Yes.
that is immobile because it's a structure, once you deploy it, your opponent gets to position around setting up the perfect alpha strike to kill that model.
Yeah.
And you don't get to do anything about that in terms of positioning your own model. So they can't charge it because it's a structure. It's so easy to kill with guns right now at ARM 18 with 18 boxes, an absurd number. Why is it the same or actually less difficult to kill than a Void Engine
Yeah.
that can move around the battlefield? It makes no sense, right?
A Void Engine, I at least get defense 12, right? Which, is worth something. You're defense 8.
Yeah, and you get to decide whether you want your opponent to shoot the Void Engine because you can move, whereas the heavy field gun can't. So realistically, with these defensive stats, you end up deploying it super far in your back line, and you only get value out of it if you use the coordinated barrage rule and flare something to shoot it, because you can't afford to have it deployed up to its maximum because it will die to guns before it gets value. So give it Carapace. I think it needs more boxes as well. This model should be a piece that takes significant effort to remove because it has one gunshot a turn, and that's it.
I think Carapace is right on the nose. I think that totally makes sense. You're a fortification. Would you rather give it more HP and more durability rather than increasing its gun?
I think I think they really want to have the synergy between Commandos and other models out there in the field, flaring a model to make the heavy field gun artillery back, near your fire base, shoot that model better.
Yeah.
So I think what I would do is remove all of the text from coordinated barrage and change it to say that this model gains boosted attack and damage rolls against a model suffering flare, or against a model, right? Like boosted attack rolls, and then on a direct hit, boosted damage rolls if the model suffering flare, right? Or boosted damage rolls against that model. Basically brutal damage against that model, right?
Yeah.
So that its gun is meaningful without ignoring too many rules.
Well, going back to the Void Engine example, right? I've got a range 12 POW 14 boostable. I can boost hit, I can boost damage, I can buy shots, right? And I move 6 inches and shoot 12, so I have an 18-inch threat range. The range output from the Void Engine, in addition to having high synergy with the whites, is very real. Void Engine costs 8 points too. So I think your point of having a POW 16 that you have to invest into the flare, right? And you only have so many of them as in your faction, and you're using other attacks to get it out there. I think that makes a ton of sense. I like that as a change. And again, if I compare it to the Void Engine, that feels balanced. You get one boosted 16. I sometimes get two boosted 14s. But you're right. As a centerpiece model, man, I want to see them on the table, right? They're cool and they should be army defining, right? So yeah, hopefully they put a lot of time into that.
They are army defining. As you will hear from most Gravedigger players lament, SFG has told us we will never get a 120,
Yep.
quote, because we have so many 80 millimeters. But most of our 80 millimeters, to be perfectly blunt, are trash right now.
Yeah.
We need them to not be trash so that people want to play them. And then maybe we won't complain about not having one. But right now, they need a lot.
So Assault Strider, same fixes, boom, boom, you give it a shield?
I think you give this model a shield, and I really want to see it be or speed 7. It's just
Okay.
way too slow for me.
Yeah.
But maybe if you don't make it speed 7, give it a carapace instead of a shield and a few extra boxes. It's either going to be a slow tank that you just are never going to shoot to death, or make it faster and give it some more boxes so it's a mobile tank that can actually get in there and mix it up and do work.
Oh.
Personally, I'd like to see it have carapace, and I'd like to see it, maybe if not speed 7, be speed 6. But I want it to be this piece that you can use to blunt your opponent's alpha, that you put it somewhere and it takes a lot of resources to remove. And my main complaint right now is that it costs 10 points, which is the same as a Valiant. It has fewer boxes than a Valiant. It has the same armor as a Valiant, but can't have a shield or anything else.
Yep.
And it's never going to be able to contribute in melee. And because the Valiants are the only real way we can fight in melee, there's an opportunity cost by taking this instead of a Valiant because you're reducing your melee potential. And it's not more survivable. I think this should be more survivable than a Valiant when you pay the points to put it on the table. And the way to do that is carapace, and either make it speed 7 or give it 30 boxes in carapace like a Valiant. So instead of having the melee output, you've got a 30 box thing that can't be pushed or knocked down and has higher armor against guns.
And your output is maybe akin to a heavy. And so even if you were identical durability to a 10-point Valiant, the question is your output even the same? I like your durability points because you can't boost, and so you need something. All right, any other solos you want to talk about?
I think that we could change Argo Brock. As a character support solo, I find him very underwhelming. One, because Stir the Blood is kind of a wasted buff in Gravediggers for the most part. We don't have any units worth putting Stir the Blood on. You can put it on the Rowdies, so they take Stir the Blood well, but there's only 3 of them, and they're an expensive character unit. So I don't usually see the point in taking Argo Brock for that character unit to really not get any other value. I think if the units in the faction, like Commandos in particular, get some kind of support to where they're actually credible melee threats, Argo Brock's value is going to increase. But I still think at 4 points, he's way too expensive for the support piece that he is. I think also 2 of his battle plans you're basically never using. We could replace Reveille with Deathly Strike and be able to give a warrior model unit grievous wounds on his melee weapon, which I think would be a great buff for him, and then replace Stand Your Ground with Tenacity, so that instead of gaining set defense, you have feign death on these models that have tough. You can pick a unit and put that on them and give them a different kind of survivability that actually matters more. Because I think right now, if your trenches get charged, they die.
Yeah, they're just
if they get shot, tenacity, feign death makes a lot more sense to keep some of them alive potentially.
Okay. That makes sense. And God, I didn't even know he had Stir the Blood, because you're right, it's never come up. Units. You've talked about Commandos a lot.
Commandos, I think, are fine as is, as long as you give the faction some way to support them. And you could do that through a caster, like the potential changes I discussed would be good for Hasker. Or you could provide some other buffs on solos and or some other casters to make them actually do the job they need to. At POW 11, when they use the mini feat, that's a pretty decent starting point, Mat 8 or Mat 9, POW 11, but it's not anywhere close to far enough. So if you can give them Weapon Master, Fury Strength, or start stacking things where you could have a unit charge at POW 15 reliably, and maybe more than one unit do that, now you're in a place where they're worth taking. Right now, you can get them up to 13, 15 if you Stir the Blood, mini feat, and use Silence of Death. But Silence of Death is going away. So we really need to do something to bridge that gap. I think Hasker, if you have 1 or 2 casters who are like, we can play Commandos as our melee infantry, great. Otherwise, just make them POW 11 base. so that they can mini feat to be POW 13. And then we can stir the blood to make them POW 15. That's a good starting point.
You've had this theme of how are Gravediggers going to kill things in the future. And again, with range coming down, which is your bread and butter, having some melee options, obviously very, very helpful. So what would you change to Rangers?
So assuming Rangers machine gunners gain lone gunman, and I say gain lone gunman, which is really to say lose the ability to CRA.
Yeah.
And I'd really like to see them actually be sort of the heavy hitters in melee. They won't be necessarily the most accurate, and they won't have the tech that Commandos bring, which is anatomical precision, but I want to see them just be the baseline infantry that you can shoot okay with, you can melee decently with, you can repair if you need to.
Yeah.
And I think a way that you could do that is once the machine gunners gain lone gunmen, first of all, make them the same POW as everybody else. And make them the same melee range too. Like, it's so silly that they're range 1 POW 6.
Yeah.
And then I would give the unit gang, maybe reduce their mat, make them mat 4 if you really feel that's appropriate, right? But give them gang so that you're incentivizing them working together as a unit. Pick whatever number for accuracy works within the new sandbox, but make it so that when they charge a model, they're hitting at POW 14, self-contained. That's what I want to see.
I like them kind of working in synergy as a unit. And like you said, them being much more of a combined arms. Again, it continues on this theme of actually giving you guys a melee threat, giving you some board presence that's not just throwing a Warjack out front and hoping, giving them an additional role. Because I do think that if you left them as they are, they're probably not worth 8 points with lone gunmen. And so giving them a little bit more viability in melee could be a good angle for them. Any other units you want to touch on?
Yeah, gun mages. I want gun mages to gain arcane reinforcement, which is one of the star actions that you will find on the Storm Legion arcane mechanics.
Okay.
And it essentially says target friendly faction Warjack gains magical weapons for a turn or something like that.
Yes, because all you have is your crates give you magic weapons, but really that's your primary way to get it in faction, right?
And it's only for ranged attacks.
Okay.
Which is a huge limitation.
Makes a ton of sense.
I'm frankly surprised that they didn't have that when they printed. It feels like a thing that should really be in the army. For one of the newer factions, they have some of the most restrictive access to magical weapons. I think probably the most restricted access in all of the Mark IV factions, which is wild. And that's an easy change, right? It doesn't make your infantry or your casters' weapons more magical. It only works on warjacks.
Yep.
So it still incentivizes you to be playing the things that gun majors are designed to support. Yep. And it just fills this hole that exists in the faction for no good reason that I can think of right now.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes sense. Black 13th, Rowdies.
Fundamentally, they both have very different roles, and they're both very good at what they do and are compelling choices in lists to the point where you will often take them in a pair, maybe one list, maybe both, but you won't always take them in a pair. I played list pairs all year that did not have the Black 13th, and other people played list pairs all year that did not have the Rowdies, and we were all correct because they're both good options but not auto-include.
Yeah.
And I think that's exactly where you want a character unit to be.
That's a pretty good coverage of the faction. It sounds like SFG has a fine line with Gravediggers, right? I mean, Gravediggers started pretty poor at the beginning of the year, and as we noted, with a proper amount of skill and dedication, they became strong, certainly didn't tilt anything. And as I listened to you and we walked through the faction, it could be a faction that could verge on, if they nudged stuff too far, I feel like you guys could fall off a cliff pretty easily. And so I hope they're being real careful with the changes. Because if you lose your Rangers, if you lose some Vargas efficiency, you're losing your spell rack. If some of your ranged guns go down, I feel like that leaves Gravediggers in a tough spot. So hopefully they get appropriate buffs, because it feels like you guys are getting nerfed just by the change of seasons, right? Well, I'll cross my fingers for you. Brandon, thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate it. Thanks for walking through the faction. Again, I'm going to keep my fingers crossed for you guys in January. All right. Thanks.
Thanks for having me on. It was fun.